life is a journey. We're sold a bill of goods that for most people, for most guys anyway, they think, there's there's a soulmate if they just do the right thing, sort of thing. But there's very different narratives and messages that men and women get in society today. Like even using that one soundbite, like doing the right thing, like they tell guys, you do what's right. Right.
Gotcha.
But they tell women, you do what's right for you, girl.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson back for another edition of the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to find us and connect with us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And if you head over to YouTube, or if you're watching this episode on our YouTube channel, then you know we've got that notification bell down below that you tap, and ding, ding, ding. You're connected to all great things audacious related. Now, my guest on today's episode of the podcast is Richard Cooper. Now, Rich is an author, a speaker, and a high-performance coach who works primarily with men to help them reach that point of excellence in a variety of areas in their lives. One of those areas is the world of relationships between men and women. It can be a very complicated world when we talk about relationships between men and women. And from Rich's perspective, based on the men he's worked with, the opinions and views on how the world works and how that ties into women and relationships oftentimes is where the biggest challenge lies. And, Rich truly believes that it's not possible to live the best version of yourself until we come to terms with a cold, hard truth of life. I promise you that this is a very enlightening conversation that I think you'll truly, truly appreciate. So without any further ado, here's my chat with Richard Cooper. Enjoy. Hey, Rich, it is an absolute pleasure to have you join me today on the Audacious Living Podcast. First and foremost, thank you for making the time like this, my friend.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
I'm always interested in engaging dialogue and conversations with people around things we can do to live our better lives. That's what the focus of the podcast is all about. I know you spent a lot of work specifically helping men reach that point of excellence, if you will. And maybe as a starting point, if you could sort of talk about why you made men your focus, or why you thought that was an important place for you to sort of plant your flag, so to speak.
Yeah, it really didn't start out that way intentionally. I kind of started my YouTube channel journey in 2014. Really just, I wanted to talk about stuff that I liked talking about, which for me at the time was fast cars and hanging out with entrepreneurs, right? So I'd come from EO forums and running my own business for quite a long time. It was successful. And I thought that I could sort of mash up almost like Top Gear and TED Talks, sort of thing. Right. So I did that for a bit, and I wasn't targeting men or women or age demographics. I was just, this is what I like to do, so we'll see what happens.
Yep.
And after I did about 5 or 6 of those interviews with some of my friends and their cool cars, I started to run out of friends with cool cars that were willing to have conversations and let me drive their car and film it and put it out on YouTube.
Right.
And a guy came along one day and he said, in the comments, hey, Rich, I really appreciate everything that you've talked about with business and making money and cars and all that sort of stuff. It'd be cool if you did a video telling guys the kind of women to avoid dating so they don't ruin their lives. So I thought, all right, I've got lots of experience with that. Why don't I,
But Rich, that seems like a huge convergence with cars and entrepreneurship, no?
Yeah, but I still continue to do them in my cars. I would put the GoPro on my windshield, and I would use the time driving to or from the office when I was commuting in, and sort of having those conversations and stories. And I found out that a lot of people again, mostly men. And there were some women that would watch it and say, this really helps me out a lot too. But it was mostly guys that were like, wow, this really makes sense. The dots are starting to connect. I think I now sort of see the code in the matrix, and I'm getting it now. So a lot of the conversations and talks that I have, and what people lean on me for anyway, seems to be around fixing their views and opinions of the way that the world works. And for the most part, it seems to tie in for most guys around women in relationships.
Right. Yeah. I would say, as a man myself, I think I can understand that a little bit, and relate as well. That when you talk about the issues that exist, and sometimes it happens, it's the relationships oftentimes are the heart of it. And the other aspect of this too is that you've got to kind of go through that a few times. You don't find that one relationship and you're there and life is golden. You kind of got to go through a few to understand yourself, understand other people, before you can sort of get to where you need to be.
Yeah, it's life is a journey. We're sold a bill of goods that for most people, for most guys anyway, they think there's a soulmate if they just do the right thing, sort of thing. But there's very different narratives and messages that men and women get in society today. Like even using that one soundbite, like doing the right thing. Like they tell guys, you do what's right, right?
Gotcha.
But they tell women, you do what's right for you, girl. Right. So, when you start to see these slight deviations that the sexes sort of experience and utilize in their own sexual strategies in the, out there when they're dating, if they're mating, if they're getting married or whatever, and you start to apply them to your real life, then that's when things can really improve for guys. But it's a difficult journey, and everything. Life is a journey. It's a journey of lessons and experiences.
I love the point around journey, and because I think you're absolutely right, and it's kind of neat that you're in your cars on this journey somewhere as you're giving this advice and lessons, right? And you're to go for, which is a neat little combination there. But absolutely, it is about a journey and a process, and sometimes individuals get fixated as to where they are and what's happening in this exact moment, and not recognizing that this is one of a series of steps that they've got to take. So. Yeah, no, absolutely. You on your website, you and I want to read this because I love what you have here. You say, unplug from the matrix of comforting lies with a cold, hard, uncomfortable truth and become the best version of yourself. How did you land on that, Rich? Because that's a powerful statement, first and foremost. And for a lot of people, when you talk about uncomfortable lies, like, wait a second, like I've been honest with myself. Like, where's this lie thing coming in from? I wonder if you can explain that a little bit.
Well, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
So there we go. Good question.
All right. So let's get you and your audience to buckle up for a little bit. So it doesn't always just tie into things with relationships, between men and women. So I'll drop some sound bites for you to sort of clue in a few things, because if we take simple things when it comes to relationship dynamics, men and women are different on so many levels. And one of the things that we hear all the time over and over again is we see this move and this push towards women trying to be as successful or as similar as possible to men, because they've been told their entire lives, you can do anything a man can do, or you can do it better, or something like that. And that's why you see the evolution of this new caricature today, where you get these boss girls, right? Where they'll put off having families, they'll climb the corporate ladders, they'll get degrees, they'll frame them in mahogany and put them on their walls. But what often ends up happening, for a lot of these women, is they put themselves in a position where they've now gotten to their mid to late 30s, even early 40s in some cases, and they realize that they've missed out. They're seeing friends, women, family members having children, raising families, and they're thinking to themselves, well, I want to go and find a guy. And they think that because they've gone and made something out of themselves, that's attractive, that men want a woman with a career, with a hashtag boss girl throughout her social media, sort of thing. But when they start meeting these guys, most of them are not that interested in a woman that's done that and wasted, most of her life chasing excellence, basically becoming a man. Like they think that doing these things is going to make them attractive, but what they've actually done is they've turned themselves into essentially what they wanted, which was a dude. Successful, has his act together, has his own car, has his own place, has a good social network and an influence, sort of thing. And then they start dating these guys and they're not getting serious with them. And they generally tend to spend most of their time with younger women. So to sort of distill that sort of story, men are success objects and women are beauty objects. But we've told men and women, throughout decades now that you're the same and you're equals, right? But
Right.
we're not. We're actually complementary, right? If you actually set aside all the blah 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 and all the narratives, like men and women are better together than what they really are separated. And if they start to realize that we have different timelines, we have different strategies, but if we work together, then things can be better for everybody. Like women tend to peak on the marketplace in their early 20s, right? 22, 23. And they've studied this with Evo Psych studies. So this isn't me being a misogynist. People will call me names and stuff like that. But Evo Psych studies have interviewed men throughout the world, cross-culturally, all age groups from, I think, 18 up to 75 was where the study ended. And universally, all men picked women on, photographic profiles around the age of 22, 23. Gotcha. Women, on the other hand, when they select men, they generally see guys at their peak somewhere in their mid to late 30s, right? So those two things are total and complete deviations. When she's in her late 30s and he's in his late 30s, he's pretty much at his peak. He's probably like, if you see these magazines out there and they're saying, the world's most attractive man or the world's most handsome man, like they give these awards out. It's almost always a guy in his late to early 40s. Right. And if they're a Hollywood guy, sometimes even a little bit older because they age a little bit better. They've got the money and the time to do all the work and that sort of stuff. But there's big deviations, right? And it doesn't just start or end, with relationships, between men and women. Like we were told for the last 3 or 4 years, stand on your dots, get your jab, protect your neighbor. It's the right thing to do. And recently in the last week, I saw Pfizer being interrogated, or one of the Pfizer reps on a inquisition somewhere in Europe say that the jab was never designed to stop transmission. But leaders, government leaders, presidents, prime ministers around the world said it will stop transmission. Take this thing. So there's a lot of areas in life where I have to have these difficult and uncomfortable conversations. And again, like you summarize, from my website, I unplug you from the comforting lies with the cold hard truth. That's what I do.
And the acceptance of the cold hard truth, I think, for a lot of people is a big shock, right? Because these lies could stem back their childhood, for example, and that's what they always believed, that this is my view of the world. And so I can see that can be shocking for a lot of people. Have you run across that, or what's happened like?
Yeah, dude, in all areas of life. Like you're an entrepreneur, obviously, you run a podcast. I was told when I was a kid, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree in something, and then go get a good job, right? And that's the path to happiness and success and wealth. And I learned by my late, probably 20s, maybe about the age of 29 or 30, that wasn't true, that you get hired for your resume and you'll get fired from a job because of fit. And that's really no path to freedom, success, ascend in Maslow's hierarchy of needs and fulfillment, or wealth even. And that the only way, through that path is through a handful of ways. I mean, one of the ways is entrepreneurship. You get a professional designation. You're a doctor, surgeon, lawyer. You're a high ticket sales guy. Maybe you sell yachts or private planes. You're a big time influencer, musician, actor, stuff like that. So, there's different ways to do it, but nobody told us that when we were kids. I was told, just go get a job, get a degree, frame it in mahogany, put it on the wall, go to your job and shut up and, serve the man sort of thing. And it's like, that actually doesn't work. And it doesn't get people to where they want to get to for the most part.
What I find interesting is you get a group of people and you ask about how they all got to the place that they got to. And there's not just one way, Rich. We've got here, we've done that, we've done a zigzag. But again, that's not necessarily what we've been told or told the way to do it. And so that really goes back to the whole conversation about journey, that it is a journey, but the journey is also very, very individualistic. Like what I do is very different from what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
Right. And so we talk about the lies. I think oftentimes it's the stories that are also manufactured ahead. So we talked about things that we were fed as children growing up, but then we also have our own disempowering beliefs and self-sabotaging behaviors that happen in our heads, and we manufacture stories or give ourselves reason why we can't do certain things. What's the best way of sort of getting around that from your perspective? How do you fight through that and get past that, man? Because that's a tough one for people.
Yeah, if I'm being completely honest with you, for most guys, it generally tends to be trauma or chaos in their lives. And they get to a point where it's like they hit what's rock bottom or pretty close to rock bottom. And then they have to realize, okay, well, I had this theory that I bought into, which is often called as a safe world theory by psychologists, where, like you buy into the mainstream narrative, go to school, get the degree, get the girl, get married, she'll stay with you forever till kingdom come, as long as you make your vows and blah, blah, blah sort of thing. Right. And nothing will ever go sideways. But guys, when they ego invest into narratives and stories like that, at some point come to the realization that, hang on, that wasn't true, and that wasn't true, and that didn't serve me. And, I had a coaching call with a guy this morning that booked me, a very successful entrepreneur, did everything that he thought was the right thing to do in his marriage, bought the house in a neighborhood that she wanted to live in, close to her parents, renovated the kitchen the way that she wanted, blah, 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 like all the way down that, chorus line of things, because, he did what was right as a guy, but she, at the end of the day, did what was right for her. And she ended up leaving the union, cheating on him, and, taking half his stuff and, getting custody of the kids. So, subscribing to stories and narratives that aren't particularly true can be harmful. And the problem is most guys don't get to the point of, I want to get more information, or, find out why this keeps happening to me, until they get to a point of chaos and trauma. Most guys that find me, my YouTube channel, my book, like any of my podcasts, find me because they've kind of gotten to the end of the rope and they're like, I wish I knew this 20 years ago. Right. Like, this all makes sense now.
Got you. You mentioned chaos a couple of times, and I wonder if you if you could define, when you talk about chaos, just so people understand, like, how bad things get for people before when they come to see you.
Picking a real bad business partner because they were friends, chaos from, going through the divorce. A lot of the times, for guys, it seems to be something to do with a relationship. Okay. And the safe world theory that they subscribe to is violated. Either she cheats, or she gets divorced, or takes half his stuff, or something changes for them in their life, right? Like, they don't get what they thought that they signed up for. They went out to buy a Prius with good fuel economy, and they got a 69 Camaro that gets crap fuel economy and breaks down, right? So they end up getting these realities which don't align with their beliefs, and that's where the chaos usually comes from. And for some guys, it can get pretty bad. Like, I've talked to guys, like, I have an email somewhere in my Gmail that I've saved from a Mexican veterinarian who ran his own practice, and he wrote this big long story about how he had a horse tranquilizer ready to inject into his leg because he wanted to end his life because of everything that happened, in his marriage. And across the room, he saw somebody's computer screen, and it had one of my videos up on the screen. And he went and watched it, and that, he says, saved his life, right? So for some guys, they get pushed right to the edge where they put a noose around their neck, or a Remington, in their mouth or something like that. So it can get quite bad, but, for the most part, I think guys find the difficulties and the traumas push them into an area where they're forced to self-reflect and look in the mirror and hold that guy accountable.
You almost got to break to get fixed, right? Almost like that's...
Sadly, guys like to get to the, guys love to complicate their lives and then justify why they do it. And then at some point, when they're tired of justifying why they continue to complicate their lives, and they have to come to the realization, okay, well, there's a common denominator here. And the reason why I keep getting these crap results is because I keep making the crap decisions. So how do I change that? What's wrong with my beliefs?
Yeah. There is a lot of pressure on men in society in terms of how they should be and what's expected of them. They have to be this figure, and they have to live up to these things. And when you don't have, they're unable to, there's a lot of pressure on men, isn't there?
Well, that comes to another interesting point that distinguishes the differences between the sexes and relationships, is that men are success objects and women are beauty objects, right? And men have always been disposable, and women have always been protected, right? One of the things that guys come to realize at some point in their lives is that, so there's this notion of war brides. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
So, for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, men would go off, they would fight wars, they would go and hunt. The saber-toothed tiger would maybe get him, sometimes. And women would be left in a vulnerable, position. If their mate, the father of their kids, disappeared, was put in enslavement, was killed, or something like that. So she had to adapt very, very quickly to move on. And this notion of war brides has been around for a while. It's been well researched in the last 100 years. They talk about it even during the Second World War, when the Germans went into Holland, for example, and then the Allies came in and, pushed them all back out. What ended up happening was a lot of the women were mating with the Germans, because their local population, the local men, will either pushed out, killed, put into prison camps. And then they ended up pushing back at that, and they put the women in the squares, and they would try to make a point by shaving their heads or try to embarrass them because they were choosing the Germans over the local population, sort of thing. Right. So this notion of war brides has been around for a long time. So to that point, women move very quickly from guy to guy. Okay. If a marriage doesn't work out, if a relationship doesn't work out, guys are really surprised very often how quickly she can move from him to the next guy, sometimes within 24 hours. Guys, on the other hand, we mourn, we sulk about it, we write love letters, we rip them up and burn them. We do all kinds of things to try to get over her, because evolutionary speaking, we never, until recent history have been put in a position where we had to deal with heartbreak and breakups, right? Even as far back as a few hundred years ago, 1,000 years ago, a lot of guys died for a lot of unknown reasons because we were disposable, but women have always been protected, right? So that's another big difference. And nobody talks about that today. It's just, you're all equal and you're all the same. And what's your pronoun? And here's my pronoun. And we'll all, we'll all call, it's blank slate equalism in an egalitarian sort of setup that isn't fully aligned with the way that human beings have evolved to operate. And today's an interesting world. We're basically nomadic hunter-gatherers operating in the 21st century, and it's very difficult for many people to reconcile what we're really about versus what we're told to be about.
And then you're just touching on roles, really, what you're getting into, and role identification, what role I should have versus what as a male, and versus women roles. And that's for a lot of people, it's confusing. It can be really confusing, right? And
it's very difficult. It's a tough pill to swallow, because when you start having these conversations, if you don't like something that I've just said here and you have a problem with the facts, the problem really isn't with the facts. The problem is going to be with you. And instead of owning that, for the most part, it seems like most men will get like the feathers ruffled, and women start sort of, resulting or sort of resigning themselves, to a position where they kind of think, oh, well, who hurt you? Or, you must be a misogynist or something like that. It's like, how, I have a girlfriend, I've got a daughter, I've got a mom, I have no problem with women. I just, talk about things that are uncomfortable for people to understand sometimes.
What was your own journey like, Rich, to get to this point? Because you speak quite profoundly on this, and I'm sure you may ruffle some feathers from time to time as well too. But I guess you have your own experience.
I talk about it in the opening of my book, The Unplugged Alpha. I put it out there because I basically wanted to summarize and distill everything that I've learned over the years. But there was three things that really forced me to look inside and take ownership for the results that I was getting in life. The first thing was when I was running my debt relief business here in Canada around 2010 to 2012, I had to get involved in a lobbying effort. And there was this bill in Parliament called Bill 55. We dealt with lobbyists. I dealt with politicians and bureaucrats. And that was kind of a red pilling moment for me, where it was like, okay, I thought all these people really cared about society and, the consumer, and they wanted to protect the little guy. And I mean, I was dealing with bureaucrats from every political party here, everything from the conservative side all the way down to the socialist side. And I found that even the socialist parties were just self-interested in having their position kept, and they didn't really care about what was good for the consumer. And they ended up passing this bill, which basically made getting out of debt for people cost about a third more and take about 2 to 3 years longer. And I thought to myself, okay, well, that's interesting, because that completely violates everything that I believed in. Then I went through a divorce shortly around the same time. And again, at the time I thought, okay, well, family law is fair. We'll just get divorced. We'll share custody. She'll keep what she has. I'll keep what I have. She was a lawyer. I was a successful entrepreneur, and everything would be fine. But that was about, 2 years of holy crap. I won't get into details because, we got a great relationship, and we have, a kid to parent, obviously. But that was a big eye-opening moment. A lot of guys, for most men today, getting divorced is a big red pilling moment for them. And I think the last thing was, after I got divorced, I went out there, started to do my own thing, dating, and I got involved with the single mom. She had a couple kids in tow from her prior marriage. And I invested in her and her kids. And again, my safe rule theory collapsed on itself when she went out and cheated on me one day. So there's all these sorts of things that can come at a guy throughout his life, whether it's in business or in relationships or in health or something like that. And there's moments where you have to get to a realization where it's like, okay, it's not the world, it's not government, it's not, the president or the
Right.
prime minister. It's none of these things. There's something wrong with what I believe. And why is it that when I believe something, it doesn't serve me when I find out that that was a lie, and then that was a lie, and then that's not aligned with reality? So it's that inner work of coming to the realization, hey, that guy looking back at you in the mirror in the morning is the one that you need to deal with first.
Right. And deal with that is also dealing with the lies that you have in your head, or the stories, like I said earlier, that we manufactured. I wonder, Rich, if you can talk about then the significance, because I think a key part of the healing, the fixing fixing the broken, a key part of that is understanding your own individual value or worth, particularly as a man. I wonder if you sort of talk about through that process and the importance of getting to the point of, this is who I am, this is what my worth is, this is what my value is.
Yeah, and that's another big difference, between men and women too, is that men's value is created. Like, we're born as nothing, and we have to do something with our lives, right? There's a reason why when women become interested in a guy on a long-term basis, they're more concerned with his future. They don't really care what he did in his past. They're concerned with, is he going to be a good provider? Can he protect me? Can he provide? Can he put a roof over our head? Is he going to be a good father? That's what they look at. And when men look at women, they're generally concerned with her past, right? Men have learned, for the most part, that women don't generally share their pot of gold with men. So they're not particularly interested in her resources or what she brings to the table financially. He's more concerned with, okay, well, what did she do in her party years in her 20s? Like, was she with one guy for 10 years, or was she with 100 guys over 10 years as a single woman traveling around the world, racking up notch counts? Like, so there's a big difference. So men's value is created, whereas women's value needs to be protected or preserved, right? So when I talk to guys, I give them different advice. Become competent, become strong, become virtuous, learn how to make money, become masculine, have competency skills that women like and admire. Like, do you have the capacity for violence? Can you walk softly and carry a big stick? These are all the things that women tend to admire and respect and value in a man. And if I'm having a conversation with a woman, it's like, don't listen to what they've been telling you. Don't think that you can run around being as promiscuous as a guy, because you will be judged for your past, whether you like it or not.
Right. You sort of that quick list of rundown of what you encourage men to do, and I think one thing I find really interesting is the idea of being a person of interest, or someone that is interesting, because that will draw people to you, right?
Women love a guy that's influential and is interesting. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's a reason why an unattractive guy like Mick Jagger had so many women in his lives, right? He's not a great looking guy, but there's a famous story, I talk about it in my book too. I think there's a famous story where he was on a date with Angelina Jolie, a young Angelina Jolie, and he left her to go out with Farrah Fawcett. Wow. I mean, there's a lot of unattractive guys that would love to be in that position, but if you're an influential singer or an artist, that's pretty easy for you, right?
Absolutely. And I think, when you can, and also too, there's a part about being genuine, not just trying to create a facade or trying to create an image that people like, be genuine, authentically interesting. Cause because that's going to serve you in the long run.
It's actually not that hard for women to vet guys when it comes, stuff like that. Like, social media is out there today. And if you're an interesting guy and, you're competent, people, men want to be you, women want to be with you, sort of thing. You're doing things with your life. You're putting a dent in the universe. You know how to make it rain. You know how to make money, sort of thing. You'll have a social media presence. Like, whether it's on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever platform, a woman will be able to Google your name and see that you've done something with your life.
Yes, absolutely. The significance of being a strong masculine man is something I actually saw one of your videos and you sort of talked about that. Again, we talk about the role of what the man should be. That is a key aspect of them in terms of how they're viewed by the rest of the world, isn't it?
Yeah. And a lot of guys today are let down because they've been told, just be yourself, just be a nice guy. And there's not a lot of guys out there. I mean, your listeners will probably agree with this immediately, but there's not a lot of guys out there that have gotten into a girl's pants or gotten into a relationship with a woman because they nice guyed their way there, right? Women need to have genuine burning desire for a guy. It's chapter 3 in my book. And if it's absent, then it's nearly impossible. Now, that lets guys down, because if they've heard, some social narrative about just be a nice guy, just be yourself, the right one will come along if you wait long enough, you don't need to chase excellence, just, do your thing. And I think the stat is something like a third of guys up to the age of 33 now are essentially sexually inactive. They don't have any interest from women at all, and they're wondering why. And it's like, okay, well, if you live in your mom's basement and your hobby is playing Fortnite or video games, and you work as a door greeter at your local superstore, you're going to have a hard time attracting women. Doesn't matter how nice of a guy you are, or
Right.
how willing you are to be a shoulder for her to cry on. She's going to go off and bang Mr. Interesting when she's crying on, Mr. Sensitive shoulder sort of
Right.
thing. So
Right.
guys get let down by that. And I don't think it's particularly useful or that it serves them, but it's just, again, one of those conversations that has to be had. And
Right.
a lot of men don't like that today, right? Like there's this subculture of guys that are called incels. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Mm-hmm. I think
There's
so.
there's an understudy from David Buss. I can't remember his name right now, a Scottish lad, and he did this large study on the incel community. And one of the things that he learned is that, I always thought that, like you could tell a guy, well, hey, you're a pretty good looking guy, just go to the
Right.
gym, lose some weight,
Yep.
learn, get a better job, make some more money. But they don't
Yep.
want to hear that. They actually want to sulk. They want to surround themselves. It's the whole misery loves company thing.
Yeah.
They actually want to point at women and say, it's not my fault. They only want the good looking chads. They don't want anything to do with me because insert reason, my bone structure is wrong. I don't have enough hair. My skin's
Right.
the wrong color. They just don't want to take any ownership for the results that they get out of life. So there's a lot of moving parts to this problem that we're dealing with in today's world.
Well, and it just seems that there's so much little things that can be done. Like, you certainly can find ways to be more interesting and more desirable, more masculine. There isn't just one particular thing, because for each woman, it might be different what they find more desirable or what they find most interesting. So I think there's a lot at the disposal for men if they're really looking to improve or become that person that's desirable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's work that needs to be done. I mean, like one of my catchphrases you'll hear in my videos or in my book a lot is just do the work.
That's it. Absolutely, do the work.
Simple phrase, but it requires a lot of work.
Well, it is, and you sort of talked about the chasing excellence or winner's mindset. You don't just arrive. There are some steps to go through, but I think a really important point, and for me, I've always held firm to, is you've got to look at because again, we talk about the journey thing. It's your journey. And, Rich, you've done some great things that perhaps I can use and incorporate, but that doesn't mean I have to follow the path that Rich took to get to where I need to be, because it is slightly different, right?
Everybody has to follow their own path, but they do have to understand what works and what doesn't work.
Right. Absolutely. So I got to throw out, you're a podcaster as well. You talked about your book, The Alpha Unplugged. I wonder if you could, which is a bestseller, which has done quite well. And I wonder if we can let listeners know where they can grab those. I'm assuming it's on Amazon, like everything else in the world.
Yeah. Probably the best place to find my stuff is to go to my website, which is just richcooper.ca. And you'll see links there to my book, my men's community, my podcast, my YouTube channel, my courses, everything's there.
Got you. And YouTube is kind of where you first sort of started, isn't it, in terms of getting content out there?
Yeah, YouTube's a great place to get discovered. I mean, if you have an interesting story to tell and you're captivating and you know how the algorithms work, it's a very, very good place to get introduced to viewers that need to hear about what it is that you're talking about.
For sure. And then the podcast, I mean, as a podcast myself, I got to give you a shout out. And I don't think we recognize how the work goes into podcasting, and it's a lot, and we're planning and guests and editing, all that kind of stuff. And so I wonder if you sort of talk about the podcast and the focus of that so people can check that out.
Yeah. So my main podcast is called The Unplugged Alpha. It basically starts from YouTube. So I do a weekly show every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's always a starting topic, and people have an opportunity to call in and ask questions as well. Then the podcast is thrown on audio podcast platforms like iTunes and Google Podcasts and all that sort of stuff throughout the weeks. And you'll find clips out there on social media. If you start diving down the rabbit hole of my work, you'll probably see the algorithm start to recommend that to you as well. So that's like, if you don't want to watch a 90-minute podcast, there's probably going to be like a 3 or 5 minute clip that'll be served to you at some point with me on it talking about something.
Nice. One last thing I want to ask you about. One of the things I've heard you talk about in the past is red flags.
Yeah.
And we sort of touched on a little bit of them as well in terms of the manufactured stories or the stuff from our childhood. What kind of common ones are you seeing? Are there other ones that we haven't touched on that you see?
Yeah.
often?
So the red flags that you're making reference to probably tie into the 20 red flags, which is one of the chapters of my book. And you can get that chapter for free, by the way. You don't have to buy the book. If you go to my email list at entrepreneursandcars.com/red-flags and opt in, then you'll be able to download the list. But it's a list of 20 red flags, which from my experience over the last few years, dealing with guys on coaching consults, dealing with women, dealing with couples, seem to be the most recurring ones. Like, you could probably make a list of hundreds, if you wanted to, but I wanted to distill it down to 20. And I think if guys pay attention to these 20 red flags and they avoid them as much as possible when they invite a woman into their life on a long-term basis, they won't unnecessarily complicate their life. They'll probably have a much better experience with low drama, better virtues, all those sorts of things. So, I mean, you have to go check that out to get all the details.
For sure. Or even recognize because the flags could already be there and you not even know you've accepted them as the norm, right? And
again, like I said earlier, men love to complicate their lives and justify why they do it. So, for example, if they have a woman that's in their life that, let's just use something simple like a shopping addiction, okay? And then you'll just be like, she's just a girl. She just likes to buy 17 things and then try them out in the house and return them and has to go back, and she spends or has an addiction to booze or cigarettes or reality TV shows. Any kind of addictive personality is going to be something that you don't really want to invite in your life on a long-term basis. So you got to consider these things. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful women out there that would be a compliment to your life and wouldn't complicate it unnecessarily. So why do you want to invite somebody that's damaged into your world that's going to make your life miserable?
Right. The word complementary, you touched on it earlier. You mentioned again, that I think it's extremely important when you talk about the dynamics of male and female, they complement one another as opposed to trying to compete, right? And that's a really good point that we need to understand that.
That's actually one of the red flags too, as well, as a woman that competes with a guy, right? I mean, the reason why that one's in there is a woman can't look up to a guy as her hypergamous best option if she's constantly competing with him, right? A woman wants to be with a giant. She wants to be with a guy that leads, right? And that's different from the narrative that, we've been told men and women are equal. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of get your head around.
Got you. Well, Rich, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the dialogue, the cold, hard truth as you delivered it, breaking down those lies. And I think more than anything, the work that you're doing to help men get to the place where they need to be, to get to that winner's circle and develop that winner's mindset, that place of excellence that you talk about is so, so important. So thank you for the time and keep doing the good work you're doing, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you having me on.
Take care. Back we are here on the podcast. I really want to send out my thanks and appreciation to Rich for being here, stopping by, sharing your insights around the cold, hard truth of relationships that are facing both men and women. In order for us to navigate life in a way that allows us to achieve our maximum potential, we really got to put all our cards on the table and start that truthful journey. And that really begins on the inside. And listen, while we're talking about relationships between men and women, this really applies to all facets and all areas of our lives right across the board. So it's not just exclusive. These principles that we're talking about can be used in our everyday lives. To learn more about Rich and his work or his podcast, or even pick up a copy of his book, The Unplugged Alpha, The No BS Guide to Women Life, head over to richcooper.ca and certainly check him out and learn more about him. So again, Rich, thanks for being here. It was much, much appreciated. When I think back to my conversation that I had with Rich, he really left us with a lot of great nuggets of insight. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my chat with him, it would be this. When we were kids, there was a bunch of basic life lessons taught to us that were intended to help shape our understanding of the world and provide some guidance as to how we should be moving through it. I'm talking about things like, be yourself, follow the rules, get good grades in school. And these are some of the more common ones that we're all familiar with. Now, given our lack of big world experience combined with our youthful naivety and optimism, we accepted what we were told, and essentially what we did is we adopted them into our everyday lives. Now, as time goes on and we begin to amass our own personal experiences as we continue that journey towards adulthood, the realities of life reveal the cold, hard truth about the world that we live in. Getting good grades doesn't guarantee you that you'll land your dream career or have your dream job. As important as it is to be yourself, if you're not content with who you are, then a change is definitely needed. The cold hard truth can be a sobering reality the day you really decide to take control of your life and live the life that you want to live and do the things daily that bring you both happiness and joy. when you live that truth and you adopt that truth into your life, you're naturally content with who you are. You don't seek approval or validation from anyone else. And lastly, you accept the fact that life is far from perfect, leaving room for an audacious way of living. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com and enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time there's brand new content that comes out. We've sadly reached the end of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and as always, I send out my thanks and appreciation to our amazing listeners and all those lovers of audaciousness. The support is so much appreciated. If you happen to be listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, I'd encourage you to leave us a 5-star rating or a comment, a like, review of some sort, because those are the sorts of things that help the podcast grow and expand and evolve. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audacious Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.